let's take some time today to go over every variation that you can possibly think of when it comes to doing a cable lateral raise. So some examples that come to mind is maybe a leaning cable lateral raise. You'll see other people standing more upright. You'll see other people using wrist cuffs where they lock in, they're not even using a handle, again, holding on to something, and they'll do cable lateral raises like that. Obviously online, when you're having influencers telling you, do this, don't do that, don't do this, do that, it can be very confusing to the average person who is just trying to find a routine. So let's take some time today to go over each of these 3 variations and discuss what is going to be best for you based off of your goals. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a secret right out the gate. Don't click off the video though. It doesn't matter which one you do. Honestly, play with all of them and see what you enjoy the most. The biggest thing is ensuring that you can even do a cable lateral raise. You know, 2.5 pounds that I have on here, it may feel pretty decent, pretty challenging for a lot of people, but if you can't even get more than 4 to 5 reps, you're probably not ready for cables yet. And I know a lot of people are confused, right? They're like, well, why is 2.5 pounds for cables way more challenging than grabbing a 2.5 pound dumbbell? And obviously that is going to be due to the increased tension throughout the entire range of motion. Because when you're using dumbbells, it gets a lot easier at the bottom range because the resistance profile goes down. Whereas when you have a cable, there's going to be tension on there throughout the entire time. So just because you may be able to do 2.5 pounds with dumbbells doesn't mean it's going to be transferable here to the cables. So make sure that you feel like you're strong enough before you use cables. When you feel like you have advanced cables, I do like them a lot more than dumbbells because of that increased tension. It's still more challenging in that bottom range in comparison to dumbbells. So let's go over the first variation here, and that's where people are leaning. There are a lot of variations when people are leaning. They'll have the cable in front of them like this. They'll have the cable behind them like this. And a lot of people will have it come through their legs. So me personally, obviously the one behind my back, a little awkward. The one between my legs, it's rubbing up on my legs, so I have to take a pretty wide stance, you know, just not all that stable or enjoyable for me. So if I am gonna do a leaning variation, I'm gonna have the cable out in front of me. So when we are doing a lateral raise, regardless of what variation you are doing, and regardless of what the name suggests, you don't want it directly to your side laterally, right? You want it actually a little bit more in front of you. So a lot of people will do like 10, what time is that? 9 and 3 o'clock. We actually want it at about 10 and 2, keeping a nice little bend in our elbow. So this is the profile that we want to have regardless of which variation we are doing. So you can achieve that profile with having the cable in front of you, in the middle of you, and even behind you. So for me personally, I prefer to have the cable in front of me if I am going to do a leaning variation. Now, a lot of people lean because they're going to increase the range of motion. When I'm grabbing onto something and I'm leaning, my delt, my side delt is really stretched, right? Like it's across my body right now. So it's gonna be much more challenging to perform the movement in comparison to if I'm not leaning and the cable's down to my side. Obviously my delt isn't as stretched, so it's gonna be a little bit easier to perform the movement. There's a lot of controversy right now with being in a more stretched position. And obviously, you guys, I'm just talking to the average gym goer here, somebody who's just trying to get into the gym. You know, we don't have to overcomplicate things unless you're really splitting hairs and you're a bodybuilder who is just trying to cap your delts ever so slightly and increase that level of hypertrophy. You know, you really don't have to overcomplicate things. So again, you are going to be in a more stretched starting position here, you know, activating the side delt a little bit more. But what's another great way to accomplish that is to simply bring the pulley system up towards your hips. So maybe a little high, just below your hip joint, okay? So it's gonna be a little bit higher. We're gonna take a step further away, and I'm more upright, but look at that. Because of where the pulley system is, I still have a pretty good stretch in my side delt. If you can still grab onto something, I would. That's still going to allow you to get a pretty good stretch at the bottom range right here, and making sure that your torso stays forward. The reason why I suggest holding on to something, because if you don't, your body might try to compensate. Your torso might start to twist like that, and if you're not watching yourself in the mirror, it can be kind of tough to notice. You might be thinking that you're staying more straight, so holding on to something is a good way to hold you accountable to that. So either of those variations is rock solid. Play with both of them, see which one feels more stable for you, and just advance with that option. We're gonna take it a step further here and keep the cable pulley at the same starting position, but we're gonna use our wrist cuffs instead, and I'm gonna tell you guys why I prefer this option. So we're gonna take off the handle, we're gonna put in our wrist cuffs, and turn our wrist a little bit more forward. I still like to hold on to something, same range of motion, keeping ourselves nice and upright. Starting position is just across our body, and we're gonna bring that arm up to the 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock? Yeah, 10 o'clock position. So up right there like that, making sure that our elbow and our wrist is in line with our delt. You can go higher like that, like it's not that big of a deal, but to keep that activation more on your side delt, this is gonna be our end range of motion. Come back down to the starting position. I like to bring it right across my body like that. Again, getting a good stretch in that side delt right there, but making sure you're not twisting, right? Make sure that you keep your chest nice and forward, hold on to something like that, and we're gonna come up like that. Now, why do I like using wrist cuffs? For me personally, I find that wrist cuffs increase stability, which is going to allow me to lift heavier. A lot of people think that makes it a lot easier because the external weight, the resistance, is closer to our shoulder joint. So a little bit of physics here for you guys, a little bit of biomechanics, okay? When we're holding a given weight, the further it is away from the joint that we are working, the more challenging it's going to be. This is known as a moment arm. If you can increase the length of a moment arm, it's going to make the movement more difficult. So another example of this, I don't have any kettlebells, shoot, but I can hold on to some plates here, okay? So these right here, pretend these are kettlebells, okay? These are 5-pound plates. I'm holding them in my hands, and you can see, I'll do like a screen grab for you here to show you the length, okay? You can see that in comparison to me holding the plates, the moment arm is longer in comparison to me holding the same weight with dumbbells. So let me grab 5-pound dumbbells, and I'll do a screen grab on both of them. So again, you guys have a visual of that increased moment arm, okay? So same thing here. Me holding, just even right now, holding the 5-pound dumbbells in comparison to the 5-pound plates is not as difficult. That's because the dumbbells are a lot closer to that joint being worked in comparison to holding onto the 5-pound plates. So you can see that visually for the 5-pound plates in comparison to the dumbbells. Well, it's kind of the opposite here when I'm using wrist cuffs, which is going to be closer to my shoulder. So if I'm holding the weight in my hand, it's further away from my shoulder in comparison to the wrist cuff to my shoulder. So you can see that the moment arm, when I'm using wrist cuffs, is a lot shorter. Not a lot shorter, but it's a little bit shorter, right? Therefore, it is naturally gonna be easier for me to do more weight when I'm using wrist cuffs. For me personally, I'm okay with that. And the reason being is I got weak little hands here. I find that when I'm doing lateral raises, holding onto the handle, my wrists tend to give out a little bit. It's a little bit of an awkward position for me, and it's just not as enjoyable. Therefore, I'm okay with that trade-off. I'm still seeing pretty good progress with using my wrist cuffs when I'm doing lateral raises, and there's nothing wrong with that. So again, we're kind of splitting hairs here, and for the average gym person, I would just say pick a variation that you enjoy that's going to increase your stability and hold you accountable to doing the movement over and over again. I used to hate cable lateral raises. I didn't do them for years because I hated holding onto the handle. It just didn't feel comfortable, but I knew everybody's telling me like, hey, they're better than dumbbells, you should do them, yada, 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 yada. Once I started using my wrist cuffs, I was actually able to adhere to the movement, find enjoyment in the movement, and therefore I'm seeing the progress that I am looking for. So that's just kind of an example here how something that is considered more optimal doesn't mean that it's going to work for the individual. And that's why it's so important for you to experiment with all of these variations versus just doing what your favorite influencer is telling you to do online. Don't be afraid to experiment and try things out for yourself, and always ask yourself, am I able to adhere to this? Do I have some level of enjoyment to this? If so, the trade-off of it being less optimal, to me, in my opinion, it's worth it. I was about to sign out the video, and I know people are gonna ask, I am the worst influencer in the world, but you guys might be wondering, where do I get my wrist cuffs from? I got mine from Hypertrophy Coach, hypertrophycoach.com. Really great quality. These have lasted me 2.5 years, 3 years now. So they're pretty good. They're pretty decent. They've lasted me a long time. You can just get your basic wrist cuffs from Amazon or Sport Check, Rocky Mountain Fitness, anybody in America. Google it, you'll figure it out. Again, not the best influencer, but they get the job done. So hopefully you guys give them a try.